Item 10B is receive a report and provide direction regarding traffic safety improvements on Susan Drive.
Good evening again. We're here tonight to provide information on the results of the comprehensive traffic study for Susan Drive and to obtain direction again from the council on the alternative to proceed with the design. Susan Drive is located west of Skyline Boulevard and is approximately 3/4 of a mile in length and parallels Skyline Boulevard from Sharp Park Road to College Drive. The road is classified as a local residential, has a posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour, and has a single lane in the northbound and southbound directions. Parking is allowed only on the west side of Susan Drive. Throughout the years, residents...
Excuse me, could we just have a little quiet so we can finish this report? Thank you.
Throughout the years, residents living along Susan Drive expressed concerns related to the traffic speeds. The city evaluated the speed and volume of traffic along the corridor and presented the recommendations to the city's TSPC committee. As a result, traffic calming measures were installed by installation of additional speed limit signs, edge line markings, and additional traffic enforcements were implemented. Several years ago, there was an accident at the intersection of Susan Drive and Jeffrey, where a motorcyclist suffered severe injuries. And although traffic calming measures were already made, the city evaluated whether additional enhancements could be implemented to address recent concerns related to sight distance at intersections along Susan Drive. The city hired a traffic engineering firm, TJKM, to conduct a comprehensive study and develop potential enhancements to improve sight distance, reduce vehicle speeds, and enhance safety for all modes of traffic. The study evaluated all five intersections along Susan Drive, starting at Susan and Evergreen Ridge Apartments driveway and Susan all the way to Susan Drive and Fasman. The data that was collected by TJKM to perform the evaluation included historical crash information, vehicle speed and volume, peak hour pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular turning movements, and on-street parking supply and occupancy. And field visits were also conducted by TJKM. And based on their evaluation, they concluded that there were limited sight distance from the intersections of Susan and Summit and all the way to Susan and Fasman due to parked cars, buildings, and plantings and the geometry of the land and roadway. They also noted full collisions, through the research, but there were no significant patterns in their crash data. Their data also indicated that the drivers occasionally drive above the speed limit of 25 miles per hour. For the parking survey, they noticed that on-street parking is heavily used near and closest to the apartments in the northern part of the neighborhood. Stop signs evaluations were also conducted. They concluded that the installation of stop signs on the minor streets can be installed at the intersections, but however, installation of all-way stop signs were not met. Based on a review and collected data and evaluation, they determined 5 different improvement alternatives, which we'll go over today. So the first alternative is to keep the existing conditions as is and do nothing. This alternative doesn't improve sight distance issues and reduce vehicle speeds, which remains the same. The amount of parking spaces remain the same as well. The second alternative improves the intersection by installing striped bulb outs with raised pavement markers to help reduce vehicle speeds. The stop signs at the minor streets and new centerline striping will be installed at all intersections. Pavement speed legends will also be installed along Susan Drive to educate drivers of the speed limit. Installation of the striped bulb out will require removal of some parking spaces. And since the cars will be stopping at the intersection existing crosswalk location, this alternative doesn't provide a full recommended intersection sight distance. The third alternative, which is the alternative identified by TSPC as the preferred alternative, is similar to what you saw earlier, alternative number 2. However, instead of the striped bulb outs, where the recommendation is to install concrete bulb outs, this alternative also relocates the crosswalks closer to the intersection, which allows cars on a minor street to stop further into the intersection. The cars on a minor street will have better sight of the cars that are traveling along Susan Drive, and this alternative will meet this intersection sight distance, and some parking will be removed as well. The fourth alternative includes additional enhancement at the intersections, which this alternative is very similar to alternative number 3 with the concrete bulb outs, but it also includes what is called a raised intersection. This alternative The raised intersection, what it does is it reduces vehicle speeds at these intersections by slowing them down because it kind of acts like a little speed hump there. The last alternative is alternative number 5. This includes the stop signs at the minor streets and new centerline striping at all these minor streets as well as pavement legends for the speeds and so forth. But however, this alternative includes the installation of only red curbs, and that will remove substantially a lot of parking spaces along Susan Drive. So just the slide. Yes, thanks. So a slide that shows all the summary of the alternatives and type of improvements and estimated costs. This slide's reformatted a little bit, different from the one that you received in the staff report. The costs ranged from $0 for doing nothing to all the way to about $590,000. The preferred alternative is approximately $432,000. The loss of parking spaces are shown as well. As you can see, alternative number 5, which is to install red curbs, it would remove about 30 parking spaces. For the alternative number 3, which is a preferred alternative, it would remove about 14 spaces. These alternatives were discussed at the TSBC meeting and where some of the residents attended, and residents acknowledged that the need for these improvements. However, they were also concerned about the loss of parking spaces. And after discussing these issues with the residents, the alternative number 3 was recommended as the alternative to proceed. So we're seeking council's direction tonight in order for us to proceed. If we council collectively agrees with alternative number 3, the city staff will issue a request for proposal for design services. This concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Ken?
Through the chair. Jimmy, I'm curious on why there wasn't or why we don't do it now, why there wasn't an option to just red curb the corners. What I've seen over the years and what the residents along Susan and those cross streets have complained about is the parking on the corners. And for a few years now, that question has come up, and I believe even the police department weren't even sure if that's legal or not, or if that was a violation to park on a corner. They're not marked. There's no red curbing or anything. Is it illegal to, if you put in crosswalks, is it illegal to block a crosswalk at a corner? That's my question, and possibly the chief can answer that. I guess my next question is that if we select one of these alternatives, and of which I guess on the staff report it was alternate 3, the concrete bulb outs.
Yes.
If we were to select that at $430,000, how would we pay for that?
Great questions.
And so I mean, is that another option, in the interim of whether we just paint the corners and see how it affects the parking? I mean, you're probably going to lose the same 12 or 14 parking spaces. Even if you were to paint the bulb outs, there'd be an enforcement issue also. But if you were to paint those corners, I'd be interested to see what staff thinks about that.
Right, painting just the corners alone, it's not going to help with the sight distance because there's sight triangles that needs to be met in order for the cars to be able to see as they're approaching out into the street. So we would have to paint a lot more red curbs in order to remove parking spaces to allow for the cars from the minor street to be able to see the oncoming cars along Susan Drive.
So it's the reason for the bulb.
That's correct. So that the bulb out will allow us to move the cars forward towards the intersection so that the cars will be able to see the oncoming vehicles.
Marty?
I guess I understand that we have a consultant on board that's going to be looking at painting red curbs and doing those type of things to make some intersections. most intersections safer. In my opinion, we have too many already that don't have any red curb, and I would really like to see us, can't wait till we start painting curbs red. Just people just park wherever they can, and it creates a dangerous situation. It's dangerous up there. I went to the TSPC meeting. I see you guys spent a lot of effort into it. It's just a lot of money, $430,000. So I work in Fremont. I would like to encourage staff to either go on Google Maps, or I can send it to you. But there's this intersection, or this three-way street, actually a T intersection, kind of like our situation, where they use different colored paving and then like the delineators. So the point is, it's a lot cheaper to do that than put curb, and you can still get the same effect. And if staff could investigate that, I think it's a lot better option than spending that amount of money. But I think what I want to stress to staff is we need to paint more red curb. You know, there's just too many areas in San Bruno where you're pulling out because there's cars pulled up right up in the intersection, and you have to take a chance with your life as you're pulling out. Like you have to go. So I don't want to see that. And I'm a big advocate of parking, because parking is really important, but I don't want to see anybody get hurt. And that was one of the things that was contributing to the problem up there, was people blocking and then having to have our police officers kind of go out and deal with that all the time. But I think most people understand when it's red, you don't park there. So
It's like the red stop sign.
well, most people. I mean, when you're at a stop sign, you're going, right? You check and boom, California stop and you're running. But when you're parking your car on a corner and it's red, you're asking for a ticket. So I could send this forward to you. I'm interested in doing something, just that I would rather have you look at that and get back to us and see what you come up with on that.
Sure, we can take a look at that, and one of the alternative on here is to remove parking spaces, and that's the cheapest alternative, just go out and paint red curves. But the staff was trying to balance the number of parking
Right.
spaces being removed, because that's the concern that came from the residents.
Right, so I'm not saying paint it all red. I understand it. As much as you do, you would paint the part where you're not supposed to park. It's just being like, you know, that exclamation point, like you're going to get a ticket by it being red along the curb return, right, as we're there. But this other design has a different way of doing it at a substantial cost savings.
Okay.
Jimmy, for line of sight, if you just painted the red curbs, how far down on either side do you really have to go to open up that line of sight?
Michael, do you know?
It's about, if we don't do the bulb outs, it's going to be about 3 to 4 cars lengths, possibly a little more on, either side of the intersection.
And that eliminates about how many spaces
So
in that whole?
the total loss at all the intersections is the total that's shown for alternative 5, so that's 30 parking spaces. Yes.
Okay.
And we lose 14 for the concrete bulb outs.
Mhm. Okay. Sounds like it would be another busy council meeting if we approve that. I mean, 30 there. But something has to be done, so. Rico?
I was just going to say, yes, something does have to be done. We know that. We've discussed this for obvious reasons why we need to address it. Also, I received a letter in the mail from Mr. Bowler, also on Susan, very concerned about the speeding. So about the traffic calming, and that is something that I hear up there, but Mr. Bowler's, I think, been up there maybe 56 years, and probably has can certainly tell me the history of how it's increased. So that's also another concern, aside from site visibility, but also the speeding.
Okay. Irene?
Well, I would like us to look at the painted bulb outs with the addition of what did you call them, Marty?
There's like delineators.
Yeah, I've seen those. I don't see why those wouldn't work. And it'd be a lot cheaper than $500,000 for concrete. So would that, you'd still lose the 14 parking spaces, but that's the way that goes. And you would still keep people away from the corner, but you wouldn't have to spend the $500,000, and hopefully that would do it. If it didn't do it, then we could keep on going and try the concrete. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the only drawback to the painted bulb outs is that the crosswalks does not get moved towards the intersection because it has to kind of stay where it is, and because there's no protection for the pedestrians to be walking where the painted bulb outs are, right? Because that's out in the street locations, and so with that, the intersection site distance wouldn't be met.
I'm sorry, Jimmy. In your picture, though, it shows. Yeah, could you show back on the drawing of alternative 2? Yeah. So.
It does move out the crosswalk, and it creates the same thing for a lot less money.
So doesn't this move out, it looks like it moves out the crosswalk in the picture? Right here. As opposed to here.
So they bring that out.
Yeah, except, well, but you can see how this is still behind the curb line. In order to get the improvement we want, that crosswalk would have to move so that part of it is beyond the curb line. And that's where we'd be a little concerned if it's not. Yeah, I'm sorry. So our concern is that where the crosswalk is currently, and if you look at the part that shows the road, it's actually maybe a little deceiving, but the crosswalk currently is back behind where the current existing curb line is, or it roughly would line up with that, the outer side of it. When we have the painted crosswalk, the painted island, we wouldn't move that crosswalk line out into that painted area, so it would still be at its current position. And when we go to the concrete version, because now we have a raised concrete extension of the corner, then we would feel comfortable that we can move that crosswalk and have it go up out beyond where the existing curb line is. And what Councilman Medina just showed us with the delineators to take the place of the island, one of the pictures also shows that, yes, they put the crosswalk through the delineated island, but it's still behind where the existing curb line is. I won't say that I would be, as a traffic engineer, that I would be completely against possibly using that and moving the crosswalk further out. That might be something we would want to look at a little more carefully, but I also wouldn't say I could tell you right here and now I would be comfortable with doing that either.
I guess the bottom line is we want our pedestrians to be safe. We want to have the sight distance. We don't want to spend $500,000. So can you figure out something in between that does all those things and only does 14 parking spaces? That's my opinion. Okay.
I think you summarized that well.
Okay.
Okay. Rico, yes? Marty?
Yes. We're gonna at least paint the curb returns red. I'm sorry. But we can at least paint the curb returns red.
For now.
For now, yeah. I mean, we're doing something. It's been like that forever, and finally getting red out there isn't going to cost too much.
So if I may, Mr. Mayor, through the chair, it's
Yes.
probably best to not design traffic control improvements at a city council meeting. Doing only part of the red curbing, which still leaves a condition which isn't corrected, actually could be worse than doing nothing at this point. So I would want to suggest referring it back to staff and back to their traffic consultant to get some expert opinion. I also do want to say that lots of cities do lots of things. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're all the right thing to do. It means that they might have tried something, and I happen to be aware of a case involving the city of Fremont where they put up all sorts of devices and traffic control signals and lights and pavement markings, and ultimately the city got sued because there was too much clutter. There was too much visual clutter, so nobody really knew what to do. So these are sort of balancing things that are best left to engineers and not designed at 9:30 at a city council meeting.
Yeah, it's getting late.
Ah, shucks.
So having
It's
said
fun.
that, do you have a pretty good feeling of where we would like to go with this?
Yes.
Can you bring something back to us that combines, all of these ideas, if you can?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.